Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
Hey, hi, Seahawk fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers here to talk Seahawks football. Got a great show for you today. We're going to talk fresh Seahawks news regarding salary cap and some restructures, and we're going to continue our series looking at NFL draft prospects. This week is the offensive tackles, one of Keith's favorite subject matters. Seahawks might not be in the market for a starter at tackle, but there are a few out there to consider anyway, certainly at least for depth on this roster. And depending on how Abe Lucas is doing over on the right side there, and the team probably knows that at this point, if he's going to fully recover and be ready for training camp in the season. Nonetheless, I think we're kind of light on depth nonetheless. But welcome in, Keith. Hope you're having a great weekend and looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah. So the Abe Lucas thing was 2 months ago. So he's already 2 months into his recovery on that knee procedure. So they should know. They should have an idea of where he's at and what it's going to take to get him back on the field. So, but yeah, you're right. They've got their starters, assuming that Lucas's knee heals properly, and we have no reason to think it won't. But man, this is a good year of offensive tackles.
It's one of the best I've seen in like 10 years.
Oh, it's more than that. I would say at least 20.
Wow.
I would go back. I'm tempted to go back to the year that Walter Jones came out, and there was like 3 Hall of Fame tackles that came out in that class. And I'm like, okay, that class was better. But it's hard to find another class that's been this good, this deep, at least as of evaluation time.
I know that we talked, I don't know, it's a couple, 2-3 weeks ago about this class potentially having, what was it, Keith, like 10 or 12 tackles taken in the first 2 rounds. Maybe up to 15.
Yeah, I've got probably 7 or 8 that will go in round 1, and an additional 7 or 8 that will go in on day 2. So that's the first 3 rounds. Pretty much half the teams are going to get a starting tackle out of this draft, if you think of it that way.
I mean, it's good news for Seattle in that they already have their tackles. You can take advantage of other position groups when teams are picking tackles ahead of you in the draft. Unfortunately, we currently don't have a second round pick. We're going to talk about that also. Just a FYI for our listeners, we're doing a mock draft show on our next episode as well. That'll be fun. So tune in for that. So first of all, I want to talk to you about all the news since we recorded last that's been going on. Seahawks. Here's the deal. I want to make listeners kind of aware of this. Keith and I have been talking about this kind of off-season plan, probably even since the season ended. And our plan essentially was, how do you generate salary cap? How do you manage the roster? How do you construct a roster? That's kind of our thing. And how do you manage the cap? How do you generate cap space, either with or without Geno Smith on the roster? And they pretty much followed our plan. It's not our plan, but our ideas are essentially the same as what they executed, which was cut Jamal Adams. Didn't know if it was going to be a post-June 1st designation or not. They went ahead and took the entire hit in 2024. I think that's probably for the best. They let go of Quandre Diggs, so we're out both of our starting safeties, if you don't count Julian Love. And then Will Disley's contract didn't match production. That was going to need to be looked at. They went ahead and released him. They made a few other moves as well. And then just yesterday afternoon, the Seahawks announced a restructure with Tyler Lockett, a big restructure. I was kind of surprised at just how much that Tyler Lockett took a pay cut to stay with this team and really helped Seattle solidify its salary cap position, not only this year, but next year. So Tyler Lockett went from like $56 million owed over the next 2 seasons, a lot of it guaranteed, and then took that down to $30 million over the next 2 years.
Actually, none of it was guaranteed.
Okay.
That was the problem from his point of view. So his contract is weird in that they've pushed so much money into the future every year since he signed it. They've restructured it in a way that gave them salary cap room then, but made it worse later. And then it got to the point where he's got this huge cap number. That's just way out of.
It was 26,895,000.
Yeah,
prior to this move.
So he's got this crazy cap number, and they needed to do something with that. So they could either, I mean, they're going to have to eat the dead money that's in there, which is like 19 million, no matter what. But they could restructure and push it into next year again. But that's still they wasn't gaining them much, and he was still going to get paid a lot. He was, like you said, 56 million over the next 2 years, and they cut it back down to like 30. And so he still got the dead money from past years, like that's still there. But now they don't have to push money forward again, and so a lot of that dead money comes off the books after this year, and so they can do that. Why does the guy take a pay cut that big? Well, probably because the team said, we're going to cut you.
You're essentially our third wide receiver this year.
And none of your contract's guaranteed. So if we can trade you, we will. But if we don't, we're going to cut you. And you're not going to see
Tyler Lockett has a lot of incentive to stay in Seattle. He's got a budding real estate career going. And you don't relocate cities when you're selling real estate. You pretty much start from scratch. So that, and then they added $13 million guaranteed money in 2024.
Yep.
So now he's got all that guaranteed. It was a nice incentive to be able to take that. He's got a guaranteed spot on the team in a city that he loves, and I think it's a great deal all around. Certainly a better deal, I think, for Seattle than Tyler, but nonetheless, Tyler's got employment. He's got guarantees now. It's definitely a win-win. And really helps Seattle. I mean, we went from $42 million in salary cap prior to this move to 56. That means effectively we've got about $45 million in effective cap space after the 51, contracts on the roster at the league start date, and then some money for draft players and all that kind of stuff. So it's a good deal. We've got plenty of money now to operate in free agency, which is great news for the team. Now, they can also manipulate contracts. Depending on who they sign in free agency, you can create contracts with very little cap space taken in the first year of a contract and push that out a little bit. So they've got enough money now to pretty much do whatever they need to do to continue to build the roster.
We've also only got 45 players on the roster, so they have half the roster that they will have when they go into training camp, because it's a 90-man roster. And so now, granted, only the top 51 count until Tuesday before the week 1, but they can't just go too crazy with that. So, but yes, you're looking at they still have a lot of roster to fill.
They don't have any safeties and they don't have any linebackers.
Yeah,
I mean, we can just start right there. It's just,
and they don't have a nose
need
tackle.
To make some. Yeah, they need to make some moves there. And we're going to talk about all of it as we lead up into free agency this coming week, and then lead up to the draft. It's going to be a fun little ride here. Do you have any ideas to the approach that they're going to take this year with free agency? In the past, they've been somewhat conservative. They made a big splash last year, but typically they kind of wait for the first round, first wave to kind of go, and then kind of dabble a little bit, and then really kind of sink into the third wave of free agency, which is essentially bargain hunting.
Yeah, my guess is that they will look at adding one player, one big name. The name that keeps coming up in my brain is Patrick Queen, middle linebacker for the Ravens, coming in to quarterback McDonald defense, and something like that. That's the kind of thing that I expect them to do. And then they're gonna pull a John Snyder, and they're gonna sit and they're gonna wait, and they're not gonna do much, and eventually, they'll get around to adding a bunch of Julian Love type contracts that don't do much as far as moving the needle, both for fans or for the salary cap, but end up filling out the roster nicely.
Yeah, I would add a name, our own homegrown Leonard Williams, at least homegrown last year for 10 games. I see them really trying to get that done, to get him signed as well. So
yeah, I guess I don't
right.
consider re-signings to be free agent additions. To me, they're just re-signings. Jordan Brooks is the other one. Both of those guys, Leonard Williams, Jordan Brooks, both those guys I could see getting, back onto the roster with contracts that are beneficial for Seattle, gets them on the roster this year, but pushes all the cap into later years. So it doesn't, each one of them will cost, $5 or $6 million against the cap is all in year one. And so they'll still have a lot of money that they can play with.
I was thinking too, it wouldn't surprise me if Will Disley comes back. He loves it in the Northwest, went to college at University of Washington. And so he's been in Seattle for a long time. And just because he was cut at a certain number doesn't mean he can't come back. And he would, I think, fit nicely into the offense that they're gonna have there. And they need a good blocking tight end. He's one of the best, and he's still young enough to where I think they could give him a nice 3-year deal at say $15 to $20 million over 3 years. That's 5 to 7. That's
why they
got to go look at the tight end market. I know, but he was at $10 million. I'm saying, 5 to 7. That's half. Not half, but you know what I mean.
I think that you're going to look at, because of
he's
his
the
production,
third-rated highest tight end in the free agency market. He's going to get paid, Keith.
He's not going to get paid that much because he doesn't. When tight ends get paid, they get paid for their production in the passing game.
He's valued.
The value of guys for their blocking it's annoyingly not enough, because that's half their job. But the ones that put up big numbers as a receiver get paid, and those that are really good blockers don't. And he's a really good blocker and not much of a receiver. So I think he's got value. I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm just saying that the type of tight end that he is one that teams just don't pay. Yeah, and so if you can get him for $4 million a year, I think. That's a bargain. But 3 years, 15, but with most of that in year, not most, but a pretty big chunk of that in year 3, where he's making $4 million each the first 2 years, and then a pile of it comes on at the end. I think that could get the job done, especially if this first year is guaranteed.
I hope that happens. I really do. I mean, that would be outstanding if Seattle could get him back in the fold for that. I don't know, but
so should we also mention that D. Eskridge agreed to a pay cut?
And Brian Monet got cut too. So,
he did, which we knew was going to happen.
D. Eskridge adjustment, it was only for $400,000, nonetheless significant. Only in that it told you that they were essentially going to cut him.
Yep.
But we need to take the pay cut in order to justify you on the roster, or even have a shot. Now it's fully not. I think a little bit of that is guaranteed still, right? But
I didn't. The stuff I read just said that it was a pure salary reduction that took him from what he was going to make as a second-round pick down to
veteran minimum,
just above the veteran minimum. So basically, it puts him in a situation where it's like, we were going to cut you. This is probably all you were going to get on the free agent market, because you've in 3 years you played in 18 games and have 17 receptions.
So he has 422,000 guaranteed.
Okay.
And a total cap hit of 1.4 million. essentially.
Is that before or after the
And so after the deal.
okay. But yeah, I mean it's they just straight
So
up
they
told
have a
him,
cap savings if they cut him of $1 million, essentially.
yeah. They just straight up told him you aren't gonna be on this roster unless you do this. And he said, okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Good move. So all in all, we're in decent shape. I think that Keith and I really did a good job kind of breaking this down quite a number of shows ago, just initially talking about salary cap and how this thing might play out with or without Gino in the equation.
They got
to mention too that Gino
th-
did factor into this as
Mhm.
well, and that he took a restructure as well. So
Yep. So they restructured Gino less than I thought. They pushed less money of it into 2025 than I was expecting them to. But then the Tyler Lockett, they restructured more and got him to actually take a pay cut, not just push money into 2025. So in the end, we ended up with Gino on the roster about 56 million, which is where we said we were going to be. I don't know. Do you think we actually know what we're doing, or are we just lucky, Bill?
Well, the really interesting thing I thought was that we nailed it. Like within $1 million, we nailed this. And I say that because we talked about them getting to 40 to $44 million in salary cap with Gino on the roster. That's exactly where they ended up. And then we talked about doing some restructures, maybe DK Metcalf, maybe Tyler Lockett, a couple other players that could have restructure options. And we talked about them doing Tyler, and we talked about Metcalf and what that could potentially generate. Now, we were off a little bit on just how much we thought Tyler Lockett might be able to generate. I think it was closer to $7 million per year instead of the 14 that it was. So we ended up with more salary cap, but they did the restructure as we thought they might with that player. So it ended up being about as good as you can possibly expect in an off season to get your books in order before you enter free agency, I think.
Yeah. Now we go into free agency. This is going to be.
Now we go into free agency.
It's going to be fun.
All right, let's get to the NFL draft, and then we'll get to free agency later in the week. We're going to talk about tackles. This is one of your fun shows. You really enjoy the offensive line. I think we all do. And it's pertinent this year in that we're set on the edges. I think Charles Cross and Abe Lucas don't have a lot of depth. We've got Stone Forsythe there, and he's kind of a swing guy that can play both sides. But really, after that, if we're being honest, there's really not much there. I could definitely see them, signing a depth project or maybe a future potential starter or a guy that could move inside or force the team to make a decision on Abe Lucas. Maybe they move Abe Lucas inside. We can talk about all those kind of things in today's show. Why don't you go ahead and start?
Yeah. So you start on, this draft class. Like I already mentioned, it's stacked. Who the top one is debatable simply because you've got three guys that most years would be with the first one taken off the board. And I think we should start with Joe Alt out of Notre Dame, 6'8", 322. Just it was a guy. I mean, his dad was a Pro Bowler. He's just a guy that can he's got that build. He can, he looks like an NFL tight end. And he hasn't even,
he played
had
tight
a single
end in the past. Yeah.
Yeah. He's just got that, he's got that really athletic build. This isn't a guy that's, 322 pounds because he's fat. He is, he's just athletically built. He looks strong. He's powerful, and his tape is just outstanding. And great feet. And that's one of the things that with tackles, their feet is so important because they've got to be able to move laterally fast enough to get outside and stop the speed rushers from getting around the corner, but also not get caught where they when the pass rusher bounces back into the middle. And so you got to be able to have that kind of quick feet, but still be powerful. It's really it's kind of a rare thing for people that size to have. And there's a lot of guys in this one that do. He's just happens to be with his long arms and his 6'8" and all of that. Team captain in the past. This guy's ready to just come in, plug him in at left tackle day one, and just go. Like I don't see anything that's going to stop him from just being a day one starter.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much said it all. Guy's got great bend. He's that super athletic. He's dominating in pass protection, which is what you want on the left side, and dominates the run game as well. Kind of a mauler in that respect, and just did it all in college. And they expect him to be able to do it all at the pro level as well. He's definitely a top 10 pick in this draft. He could go probably to New York Giants at 6, potentially New York Jets at 10. I think he doesn't go any further than that as far as
no way
a fall. You know, the top of the draft, I think you're going to have Caleb Williams, potentially Drake May. I've been hearing some things about Drake May maybe falling a little bit. Jaden Daniels, Rome Aduze, Marvin Harrison, Jared Verse, maybe Malik Neighbors, the wide receiver, and then a couple of tackles. And I think we'll talk about the next one too, the Fashanu from Penn State.
Penn State
is the next guy, and could easily be a guy, but Joe Alt's got the measurables, I think, that you want. And so does this guy. 6'6", 312 pounds, ran a 5'1" 4 or 5'1" 40, 34-inch arms, 82.5-inch wingspan, athletic. Bruce Feldman's freak list at number 23. Feldman wrote, running a 4.97 this offseason and had a 4.63 shuttle time. That 40 time would have been tied for the best at the NFL Combine among the offensive linemen there. Agility to all the time spent playing basketball growing up. Bench press 405 pounds, squatted 605, power clean 350 clean. That's what Feldman said about him. So super athletic guy, strong, bends well, great feet, light on his feet, all that kind of stuff. I like him equally as well. I think you can't go wrong with those two players, I think.
Yeah. Everything that you say about Joe Alt, you can say about Fashanu. Really, I mean, we can add another name to that list that does that, except for he's a little bit bigger, a little more powerful as a run, run blocker, maybe not quite as fast with his feet, on the edge, and that would be Talise Fuaga out of Oregon State. He's a guy that I think because he played at Oregon State, he's not getting the press as the other two, but his tape is impressive, just straight up impressive.
Solid.
And this is I mean, I get that Notre Dame and Penn State, like those are names, but he comes in and like playing against guys like from USC and Washington, guys that are going to go early in the draft, and he just dominates. I really like Fuaga's tape, and he at 6'6", 334, he's going to overwhelm guys. He's just going to drive people back.
You see him on the right or the left side?
I see him on the right.
Yeah, another guy I see on the right potentially is J.C. Latham
out of
from Alabama, 6'6", 242 pounds, ran a 4.8, 540, Keith, 35 and an eighth arm. What?
342 pounds, not
342 pounds.
He's big.
Yeah, 342. Yeah, and an 84 and a 3/8 inch wingspan, Keith.
Yep.
I mean, you're just not going to get around that guy, and he's super athletic and stuff, and he may have risen up the board just slightly. Now he's already going to be in the top 15, at least in my eyes, but he tested so well, had such a great combine, that he could potentially get up above Fuaga, from Oregon State, just on the athleticism, essentially playing the same spot. But my goodness, so that you've already got 4 offensive tackles in the top 15, I think, in this draft.
Yeah. And well, we can just keep going.
Yeah. Right.
Another right tackle prospect, a local guy out of Washington. Let me get his name right. It is what?
Fatanu.
Fatanu, Troy Fatanu.
Yes.
6'4", so he's a little shorter. 317. This guy is freaking powerful. People early on said, "Oh, he's going to be he's not long enough. He's going to be a guard." And so I don't know. He took kind of a hit for that because guards are as valuable as tackles. But then he came out at the combine and showed, hey, look, he's got arms that are as long as the other tackles. And
34 and a half inches.
yeah, he's got the length that you need. And you know he's got the foot speed and everything. So all of the reason why people were thinking he might move inside, like there's no reason for him to. I think he's a right tackle in the NFL. I think he is a guy that's going to be in the top 20. Just a very good player. I mean, his usage of his hands is stellar. I mean, it will be adjustment because he played left tackle, in college.
Why do you see him on the right side as opposed to the left side, especially after the combine?
Well, I think it's more just what teams are looking for in terms of that 6'4" versus 6'6" or 6'7" type of thing. Where with his being a little shorter, he can get underneath guys' pads. Most NFL offenses are right-handed, so they will run to the right side more. And just having him over there, I think, is something that teams are going to want to do. I mean, I could be wrong. I just it kind of comes down to the team that he's drafted and who else they have, right? If he gets drafted by a team that doesn't have a left tackle, why would they put him on the right?
This to me could end up being the best tackle in the draft in the long run, just because I like his approach in the way that he works at his craft. Like he's a good tactician. He understands leverage and power, and he's got strong hands and all that kind of stuff. Really, all the ingredients you need, I think, to be a great left tackle long term in the NFL. Now he may move to the right side. I think that he has a chance on either side, depending on the team that drafts him. If you're looking for a super athletic mover in space on your offensive line, let's just say the Rams, he may end up getting a shot at the left side, just because that might be more suited for him. But you're right;
it does depend on the offense that they run and that kind of stuff. I mean, he's a guy that for tackles are big. They just are, right? And they tend to have a certain, like, they're good moving laterally, their kick step and that kind of stuff, but they tend to not be as good at finding linebackers downfield and not getting basically juked and having the linebacker go around them. This guy's not going to have that problem. He's going to be able to find people, make contact, drive people back, even if it's 5 yards downfield. Good open field blocker.
So, this pick has been projected potentially to come to Seattle in a few mock drafts I've seen. And he's in that area of the draft.
Yeah.
Right around the midway through the first round.
15 to 20.
If Seattle picked him, where would they play him? Or would they?
If Seattle picked him, I think that they would start him at left guard and let him play there for a year as he acclimates to the NFL. And that would give them, and then, of course, if Abe Lucas's knee is bad, he becomes the starting right tackle. And if Lucas's knee holds up all year and so does Cross's, then, well, now you've got 3 starters at tackle, and you start asking around for who wants to buy one. And you sell one to the highest bidder because you have 3 starting tackles.
Yeah. Do you think that would be potentially one of the top 3 options that they have in the draft if they stick and pick?
I don't.
Okay.
This team is so full of holes, especially on defense. I don't think you draft a luxury pick like a 3rd tackle. And I mean, he would be awesome as a guard too, but you can, and sticking him there next to Charles Cross be awesome. But
So
I
why
think
did you dismiss it so out of hand?
because their defense is so bad. And if you're going to take, you could at that same spot, you can get Byron Murphy to be on your defensive line. How do you take a guy that's kind of going to have to play out of position?
Well, you don't. You take him because
desperately
he's
need
rated
someone?
higher on your board, and you follow your board. I mean, I don't know exactly where John Schneider's board's going to line up, but he could, Fotanu could end up being, several spots ahead of Murphy on their board, and who knows how they interview and all that kind of stuff. It could potentially be their best option if they stick and pick, if they don't have any trade back partners, etc. I'm trying to think out of the box here a little bit as to if we did take a guy. I wouldn't mind it personally because it's an investment in the trenches, and these guys don't come around very often. And he's one of the top 4 or 5 tackles in this draft. One of 4 or 5 they're going to go in the top half of the draft, essentially. And so to me, that's a great investment opportunity for this team. But you're right, we've already got our 2 offensive tackles started. You could, even though maybe Murphy or one of the other guys is slightly less rated, but overall you've got to weigh your board based on need as well at some point. So anyway, I like these guys. Okay. The other option was
Mims.
Marius Mims.
Yep, out of Georgia.
Yeah. Wow. What a freak of nature this guy is.
This is a guy that would be the first tackle off the board in a lot of draft classes. Like seriously, like he is, he's 6'7", 340, really powerful guy. Just, his punch at the beginning of a snap is as good as you'll see. He knocks guys back with his hands. Sometimes they're a little high and they're on the shoulder pad. You'd rather have him down on the chest a little more, but God, the guy's big. He's powerful. He drives people back. His footwork's
no
good.
bad weight.
Yeah. And okay, so why is he not higher? Well, on some boards he is, but to me it's just a matter of the other guys better of them they have quicker feet. And so they're going to get beat a little less. But yeah,
this guy has 36 and an 1/8 inch arms and an 86 and 7/10 inch wingspan. I mean, what?
Yeah.
That's if you stood next to this guy at the grocery store, you probably couldn't take your eyes off him because he'd just be freakishly long. Like
he's huge. He's just huge.
I've got him so you had him 6'7". I got him at 6'8", and his arms would go down to his knees at like 6'8". So he'd just be this like hulking human of a dude and completely fit. No bad weight around his stomach. Just crazy. I like this guy. Like I said, to me, I think he is. You might draft him depending on your offense. He might be a better option for you than Fuaga or Latham or Fotanu because he just is so athletic and so big. He could play both sides. I mean, he could be a guy that could play, I think, both sides for you in certain spots.
He played mostly right tackle in college. And so...
Yeah, he's a mountain of a man.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, he would be the guy. He's a guy that would have been the first tackle off the board in almost any draft. But in this one where he's the 6th?
Yeah.
That's when we say this is the best class in over 20 years, this is what we mean.
Yeah.
Guys just...
I got one more guy for you that I like. No, he's got a little bit more body issue than I like in my tackles in the NFL. A little bit more around the gut, all that kind of stuff, but smooth mover, one of the best feet in the business. Like when he comes in the NFL, he's going to have one of the best feet to me. And that's Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma, 6'8", 322 pounds, has 34 and an 1/8 inch arms, 82 and a half inch wingspan. He's just a glider. Like you watch him on tape and he just kind of moves so effortlessly around, super athletic, nimble guy. for that size is crazy to watch. Moves around a little bit like a tight end would move. Really explosive. He's going to be a first round guy. So we're talking like, before pick 25. And we've already mentioned 6-7 guys.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So he's a guy that he played at Oklahoma. You can tell he knows how to pass block. That is what they practice and what they do in games. I think his run blocking is a work in progress. This is very much what we said about Abe Lucas when he came out. Lucas went in the 3rd round. This guy's got better like physical traits. He's bigger, he's longer. But it's kind of the same idea. But Lucas turned out to be a great run blocker. Just once he was given a chance. This is a guy that he's a 7th tackle and still has a first round grade, like an easy first round grade, not like a kind of first round grade.
Right.
And
how many teams actually need starting tackles?
Way more than we'll admit.
That's true.
See,
I just don't. I could see some of these guys starting to follow though a little bit. Like these guys that are fringy 20-something picks can end up falling out of the first round and be huge value picks in the top of the 2nd round.
Yeah, actually, and that's the thing when there's so many and you're not like hey, we need a tackle, but we don't. But there's 7 first round tackles. We don't have to take one at the top of the draft, like you normally would in order to get a franchise left tackle. You can sit and wait.
Yes,
because
you can still get a starter. Now he might not be a dominant starter, but you can get a starter tackle in this draft in the 2nd and 3rd, potentially 3rd round. But
yeah, we haven't even talked about Javen Foster out of Missouri. I've got him at 6'6", 309, and his kick step is good. His slide is good. He's started 41 games. At some on each side. Does a good job against a bull rush, quick enough. Got long arms. I mean, this is a guy. Remember when we said earlier about the guy from Washington and how good he is at open field blocking, like finding someone out in the open field on a lead play. This is kind of the opposite. He's going to struggle in that.
Phone booth
at least,
guy.
Yep. But not really a phone booth because he can do his job on the line, but he just don't expect him to do as much downfield. But yeah, he's a guy that I think is going to go. I have him. Okay. My ranking on him is top of the 2nd round with, he's going to be a starter at the NFL in this draft because all the teams that need a tackle are going to draft one before they get to him. He may drop a little bit, but the talent's there. I mean, you're not getting anything wrong.
I've got probably 3 guys above him in my, estimation.
Okay.
Like Joe Morgan.
Yeah. He's the next
from
one.
Arizona, 6'5", 311 pounds, runs close to a 5'0", 40. He's got shorter arms though. This guy might be a candidate to move inside.
Yes.
But he's very athletic and explosive and moves well in space. He may be able to get away with shorter arms, but he's not going to be able to engage defensive linemen on the edge and kind of keep them off his body. Mm-hmm. And so he's probably going to end up moving inside. But I thought I'd mention Joe Morgan just because I think that, he's so athletic and a standout player. When you watch him play, he's just a standout. But that's in college. With the short arms, you can kind of get away with it most against most teams. But so a guy to watch though, for a guy that's going to maybe fall a little bit because teams will want to move him inside, and so he might be a mid 2nd round kind of pick.
He might actually fall down later in the 2nd round. If you view him as a guard, you have to.
Well, similar in a way that I would view like Graham Barton.
Graham Barton's a whole different
right
thing because he is not going to play tackle. He is,
but he's also 6'5" and 311. I mean, they have the same measurables in that respect.
Yeah.
Kingsley Sumataye.
Yep.
Out of BYU, 6'5", 326. Pass protection is his thing. He's going to learn how to run block, but teams that value a strong passing game will value him as a prospect.
He's a guy that needs to learn how to keep his pad level down. He needs to learn about leverage. There's work to be done, but the physicals are there, the talent's there. He needs coaching, and it's just the offense that they ran at BYU.
Yeah,
and so
he made Bruce Feldman's list as number 3 overall. Keith, hit 21.5 miles per hour as a 318-pound freshman.
God, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a guy. He, like I said, the physicals are all there. He's a guy that you can take probably at the end of round 2, maybe early round 3, I think. And if you give him a chance to develop, you take your time with him and don't throw him to the wolves and let him develop bad habits, you could have a long-term left tackle starter. Absolutely. But he's a guy that I think you bring him in. He would be a guy, especially if he falls and let's say he's available for Seattle in round 3, they would I think they'd jump on it because you stick him at left tackle for a year, or left guard.
Absolutely.
For a year,
and you get him into the system and you have him build some all that.
And let him learn. You let him play left guard for a year, and now you've got a guy who can slide outside and play tackle, and you can, whether you're looking at Lucas or Cross or whoever you want to do it, or maybe some team comes around with a first round pick and says, hey, you've got a starter at tackle and we need one and you've got extras. So, but yeah, if he falls that far.
Yeah. The other guy that I would be super interested in for Seattle would be Patrick Paul. I'm really curious as to how you view this guy out of the University of Houston. 6'8", 331 pounds. 5'1", 440, which is excellent at that size. 36 and 2/8-inch arms, 86 2/8. He's like Latham as far as his length and just hugeness of a human.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly they throw the ball a lot in Houston. So he's going to have to learn how to run block, but exceptionally long prospect.
He's exceptionally long, but his feet didn't excite me the same way some of the other guys did. And like, he's just a little slower of foot, which, you can play at Houston and do that and not have people notice quite as much. And I don't know if that's just the tape I watched or what, but I get the feeling that he's going to drop a little bit. He's going to be a guy that teams are going to look at and go, yeah, we can do something with this, maybe. And so he'll drop simply because he's not a guaranteed. Yeah, we know he's going to start.
Is he still a day 2 guy for you?
At the end of round 3, probably, because I think you can get him. Well, because you can play him at guard if you have to, and I think you can play, and especially on the right side, if you're a team that plays a lot of tight end stuff, I think you can play him there, but. At least for me, like maybe it's just because I've only watched a couple of game tapes for him. I'm not saying that he can't develop into a starter or that he doesn't even have it. You don't see it, but they ran a weird offense in Houston where, the offensive lineman had weird spacing that's abnormal, and he didn't have to, use that kick step and that slide in order to get outside and stop from around the corner. He's already set up a little further out. So it might just be a case of coaching and style. And, whoever gets him will be getting a massive bargain, getting a guy like him later.
So speaking of bargains, are there any players that you would love to see the Seahawks draft?
Oh, there's lots of guys I'd love to see the Seahawks draft.
What do you think about Christian Jones out of Texas?
Okay, so Jones is not my favorite prospect.
How about Rosengarten out of Washington?
I've got him moving to guard.
Okay.
So I would say, as far as guys, Matt Gonzalez out of Pitt would be fun. He just has that build, and I think that he needs some refinement on his technique, his hands and stuff. But I mean, I'm thinking you're talking like 4th or 5th round, and a guy that could become a starter down the road. I mean, he would, like I said, he'd be a fun pick. Why did you bring up Christian Jones? I'm curious.
He just kind of has some upside. He's a little smaller, needs to come into the NFL weight room for a year. He'd be, you're probably wouldn't suit up on Sundays, but be on your roster kind of a guy. It eventually work in to be your swing tackle potentially. He's got a good athleticism upside, good size at 6'5", but he's only 305 pounds. Mm-hmm. He's got a little bit of room there to add, but he's got, almost an 84-inch wingspan. And he just has the attributes as far as his good hands, his technique is okay, powerful kind of punch, but needs some time, needs a little bit of development. So, but, in most drafts, I think that he's maybe a 3rd round guy, and he could potentially slide into the, 5th round range, 6th round. And to me, it's a good value. That's a good value range for the Seahawks, because we talked about this before, whereas this draft really falls off shelf wise after the 4th round.
Yeah.
And so you're looking for kind of developmental guys. If you're going to retain picks, you're going to look for special teams. You're going to look for these kind of guys, because they need a year. And so that's all. He's just kind of, he's equally as good at pass blocking as he is at run blocking. So he's just kind of a well-balanced prospect that needs a little bit of refinement to me, and some weight, in the weight room and stuff.
So another guy similar that I actually like more would be Dominic Pooney out of Kansas. 6'5", 313, a guy with 33 and 3/8 inch arms. So it's not like he's short armed or anything. A lot of he's projected as a guard, and I think that's actually fine, like a good spot for him. He's not the fleetest of feet and all of that, but he's got better feet than like Jermaine Ifedi ever did. But still, Ifedi should have never been a tackle in the NFL. Pooney is a guy that, like, he can play guard, but man, if you need him to play tackle in a pinch because somebody gets hurt, that's all he did in college. His 3-cone at 7.47. I've seen, wide receivers in that range. Tight ends are typically in that range. And this is a guy that's
DK Metcalf was in that range.
Yeah. This is a guy who's over 300 pounds.
So I will say this, Nagy loved this player. He was at the Senior Bowl, loved this player, liked the way he finished practices, finished off defenders, went to the ground with a few guys, that sort of a player, a little nasty streak, never hurts anybody in the NFL. And this guy's kind of got that. So yeah, I mean, you can work with a prospect like that for sure.
Yeah. So you're talking about a later round guy. If the Seahawks drafted him, let's say they were able to get him in the 5th round, I would say, okay, now you got your left guard with and your emergency tackle.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to get a starter out of this draft in the 5th round. That would be amazing. Yeah, for sure. I don't have anybody else to talk about on my list. If you had anybody else, we're 40, almost 50 minutes into this thing. Yeah. Just kind of want to wrap, and you could talk about these guys for a long time.
I could.
But yeah, to me, this is one of these shows where we're talking about the tackles, but we don't really need a tackle on the team other than maybe a lower end potential starter or a swing guy that could move around on the roster for you.
And those guys aren't all that interesting.
Yeah, and it's harder to evaluate those guys too, because the team, you never know how the team evaluates these kind of mid to the late round picks, because
Yeah.
Do they see them as guys that could potentially come in and start, or are they always viewed as guys that are going to be the back end of your roster? I don't know.
Let me look.
And they don't add special teams value to you unless they can play on, interior on punt, punt teams or whatever. But usually the guys you've got out there on the offense sometimes, stay out there too. So.
No, I think that is the list. I mean, we didn't talk about the guy from Yale, but I'm okay with that. Yeah, no, I think that's we talked about a lot of guys, and we talked about a lot of guys because there's a lot of guys worth talking about.
You mean the guy from the Emagaji?
Yeah,
Emagaji, Kieran Emagaji from Yale.
Yep.
Yeah, he's gonna actually go, I think, in probably the second or third round. I bet 323 pounds, ran a 5.10 40. I think people in the league view him as super athletic, and but to play on the right side in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good show, Keith. Lots of prospects. This was our last offensive prospect show. So the exciting thing for me is we kind of moved to the defense. There's a lot of players, and Seattle really needs help on the defensive side. There's a lot of players starting at defensive tackle and defensive end, which will be in our next show to help this team. So that'll be fun as well. Also, our next show is going to be our first mock draft of the season. I can't believe we waited this long to actually do one. But I think we're both excited to share our mock drafts with everybody. Anything else?
No, I think let's wrap this up.
Excellent. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and our own YouTube channel, and hit the subscribe button when you find it. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.